Welcome to Let's Talk About It. A podcast gives a platform for real talk, real people, real topics, real conversations. Please subscribe, like, comment, enjoy this journey, and enjoy this ride. Welcome to this week's episode. Welcome, everybody, to this crossover collaboration podcast of Let's Talk About It and Untamed Psyche. You know,
Whoop, whoop.
my guest, see, she's in with me. And for the people on YouTube, thank you so much for watching, subscribing. Please like, share, comment. And for the people on Apple and Spotify, on both Let's Talk About It and Untamed Psyche, give us a big 5-star. If they can have 10 stars, I say give me 10, but I'll take the 5 for now. Plus the rate. Chris, how were you doing today?
I'm doing good. Until I broke my computer. But I was doing good. It'll be fine. It's just funny.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you right now, this episode is going to drop on Let's Talk About It and on Untamed Psyche. Chris had a little mishap because we was going to do we was going to do her. I was going to interview her for my podcast. Let's Talk About with Lou J, and she was going to do me for hers, Untamed Psyche. So I said, you know what? Let's just combine together. We'll share the intel, we'll share the info. But you know what? I'm going to be a gentleman, so I'm going to let you go first. Yeah, I mean, since we're going back and forth, we're gonna go back and forth and like find out about each other's podcasts and each other's journeys. So I'm gonna let you go first, ma'am.
Oh, well, that's so sweet. So sweet
I
of
know.
you.
I know.
You came in like a superhero, fixing everything today. So I love it. So my name is Crystal Marazzi. I produce the Untamed Psyche podcast. And I got into podcasting, right? Because I felt like there's a lot of people that are alone out there and they feel like that their feelings are their own and that they're not shared with other people, right? So like they think they're alone in their feelings, right? So I started this podcast because I wanted to meet people out there and let everyone know that even though our situations may be different, we have similar feelings. So tell me, I'm curious to know why you started your podcast. And I feel like I already know the answer, but let's just put it out there.
Well, Chris, I can tell you right now, like I think I heard Joe said, Joe Summers, which I heard your podcast on hers, Breakfast of Choices. I think she said you heard mine's on her podcast.
I did. Yeah.
Awesome,
Yep.
awesome. Why I started mine is probably unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, I'll break it down to you. I've told the story a lot. 2 years ago, I was living in Aurora, Colorado. And like, one night at the gym, like, I was on my gym journey. I usually turn off my phone. I don't want to be bothered. You got the headphones on, you turn it off, you want to get into it. But for some reason, I forgot to turn it off. So then I get a phone call from my daughter's brother, which he's not my son, somebody else, well, baby mom, whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And he said, "Yo, did you hear about Sherelle?" I'm like, "What you talking about, Sherelle?" And Sherelle's my daughter.
Right.
Um, damn, it's hard every time you tell this shit.
It never gets easier.
She died. So I got weights in my hand. I got one weight in my hand. I dropped it. I'm like, "What do you mean she died?" So I was like, "Yo, say that. I'll call you right back." Because at that moment, I didn't know how to process that shit. I didn't know what to do.
For sure.
Because
You're
like,
probably in shock. Yeah.
yeah, your child just passed away.
Yeah. I
So
can't imagine.
I got my stuff together. I went home. So I called him back. I was like, "What happened?" He said that a friend of hers came over and basically, long story short, a friend of hers came over. They used to smoke weed a lot, so she brung over some cocaine to give it a shot. So then didn't know that was laced with fentanyl.
Oh no.
So after the friend left, she came downstairs. She had my three grandchildren there. You know, one was playing the PlayStation, one was on the floor playing little trucks, and she had my at the time 9-month-old youngest grandson,
Right.
and she was holding him on her lap, and then she just collapsed in front of my damn in front of my grandkids. Uh, the youngest, the oldest was trying to shake her and wake her up, screaming, hollering to call 911. And when they got there, it was too late. She was already gone. He explained the situation to me. I got off the phone with him. I didn't know what to do. I was like fucked up. Excuse my language.
Right.
Um, so then the first thing I did was right. I called my job. I said, "Listen, man. My daughter just passed. She died. Like, because I was scheduled to go on vacation that week.
Yeah.
And I was like, listen, it's like, listen, yo, don't worry about it. Go take care of your daughter." So fast forward this, I'm trying to get back to Philly because at this time I was in rural. I'm originally from Philly. Um, so I go back home. I get there, and I had to go to what's it called? The viewing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I step in. Everybody steps out to give me my time. So I can't make anybody imagine this shit. So when you walk through the door and you turn, then you see your your child in a casket. She's 34 years old. And everything just coming to your fucking mind. I just held, I mean, she's a baby, she's my baby girl. I mean, she's just everything. You walk up to her, and I'm like, Chris, what I'm saying, I'm walking like it looked it was like I was walking a mile.
Sure. Like in slow motion. Yeah.
Yeah, it was maybe like 25 feet.
Right.
Okay. No lie to you, it took me a half an hour to get there. Okay. For you know, and I finally look at her and I'm in shock, right? So
Right.
I go down on my knees and I say, like, why? And past that point, I'm there, and then people like they come to me, they're like, "You okay?" And and this is something that came back to me because I've told the story so many times. I snapped out. I flipped out.
Mhm.
I said, "Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Like, why is she in there?"
Right.
No parent should ever have to bury their child.
I agree.
No parent. And everybody like, just, oh man, they ain't know what to do because I'm flipping out. You
Right.
know what I mean? If you're a parent, you're a parent, like you protecting your child, right?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
But I can't protect her at all because she's gone.
Right.
Okay. So next day at the funeral, like, sitting in the front row. And I'm telling you right now, we all go to funerals. All of us go to funerals. But it's very different when you sit in the front row.
Oh, I know.
Okay. If you lost a loved one or like, your mother, father, whatever. But when you sit in that front row for your child, you have no comprehension what's going on. All right.
Absolutely.
So at this time, I have to bury my child. Now, this is on a Friday in Philly. A week later, I have to get to Arizona for my son's wedding,
Mm.
her brother. Okay. So at this time, I have to bury my daughter, put the final veil on her, and then I have to, at the same time, I'm sorry, I forgot, I was transferring here to Charlotte.
Right.
And I already made my appointment to find an apartment that weekend.
Yeah.
So I had to bury my daughter on Friday. And I had to go to Charlotte to get this apartment where I'm at right now.
Hmm.
Okay. And my mind's going crazy. Thank goodness for the property manager over there. She was understanding. She said, "Don't worry about it. Just I got it. I'll take care of it." So I have to go through the process of holding my grandkids. You know, everybody coming up to you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Now I've said this on Joe's podcast. I'm gonna say it here. That's the worst thing I want to hear. You're sorry.
Right.
Okay? Because you're not gonna understand. All
Yeah.
right. Nobody's going to understand. Even if someone's lost their child already, because they have a different understanding how we do it.
All right.
Okay. So, Chris, I can tell you this: when you lose a child, that's something you'll never come back from. Okay. And it changed me. So at this point, I have to ride down here to Charlotte, sign this lease, get this apartment, then drive all the way to Phoenix, Arizona, put on a happy face for my son's big wedding day.
Right.
This has been a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a hard week for sure.
It's a week from hell, but heaven and hell, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I put on that front for my son. I'm very happy for him. He's a dad now. He married the woman he loves. Uh, so then I had to go back to Colorado to pack up. Okay. This is I had one last day left. I had to finish out my commitment there. I'm a truck driver. Delivering to Colorado Springs. Um, and I'm thinking about everything. Everything goes in my mind. I mean, right? When you think about one bad thing, I don't know, Chris, you ever been through this? You think about one bad thing, then every bad thing that ever happened to you
Oh yeah, it
comes.
opens the door. Especially if it's quiet and you're by yourself and that door gets opened, it's like it's a floodgate. It's like it's the dam to the river.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And that's the worst time to think.
Yeah.
And I'm driving by myself. I'm having a bad day. Then everything start hitting. Like, because I lost my mother, my father, and my grandmother back to back years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm losing my daughter. Everything hit me. So at that point, I let go of the wheel. Okay. I've told the story before. I'm in a truck.
Yep.
I shouldn't be here. Right.
Right.
Front tire hits a boulder, bounces me back. Can't make that shit up.
Nope.
So I was like, maybe I'm supposed to be here. So I'm going through the motions here, Charlotte. Then I had that one bad time. And Chris, I'll tell you, I was almost at that end. Then I get a DM, which I never really answer DMs. I mean, you know how they are. They some dickheads
Sure.
who go the DMs. Uh, but it was so happened. It was from another podcaster, Tamberlyn Connor. She got a podcast called Hope, Help Other People Evolve. And she heard about my story because I gave like some TikTok thing, whatever, and I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to vent, whatever. Nobody really responded, but she got back to me, and she was like, "You want to come on my podcast?" I was like, "Nah." At that time, I'm like, "No podcast, man. People they all frauds, they fake." So I mean, they just doing it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know all the stereotypes you hear.
Yeah, it's all glitter words. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys try and get views and you try to make all this millions of dollars, which I found out that ain't true.
Right.
So I was like, no, I'm gonna go on there. And she made me feel comfortable. And it helped me in a way. It helped me.
Right.
So then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start my own podcast. I don't know why. I was like, maybe I can like help other people. Like, it was all type of situations why I started. Like, I like to have conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. I like to do different things. So I said to myself, this is the first time in my life I can do something for me. Because I don't know if you've been through this. Majority of my life, I've done everything for everybody else.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
a giver. Hmm.
Right. You're a giver, right?
Yeah, I'm a giver. I'm a fixer. It's exhausting.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So that's what I did. So I say, you know what? I'm going to do it differently. I say, you know what? I don't want to be like everybody else because everybody has their own platform for either it's addiction or whatever it is. And I got no shade against that. That's what everybody wants to do.
right.
So I say, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I want mine to be different. I'm going to say what I want. I'm going to bring everybody on.
Yeah.
Dif- Different topics, different people, different
Mhm.
journeys. I do a little wrestling podcast with my co-host Mario Castro. Wait, that's on there.
That's
Okay.
awesome. Yeah,
So like I consider let's talk about it as like a menu, right? Let's say, okay, Chris, like no, you let's say you and your husband walk into a restaurant, right? You got a menu, right?
right,
So, you might like it'll be some chicken, fish, steak, calamari, whatever's on there.
right.
You can pick and choose, right?
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
my
a little bit of
podcast,
everything. Yeah, for
right?
sure. Yeah,
Exactly.
mine's very similar too with that. Like um, there's people on there that talk about trauma. There's people on there that just come on and talk about their business. We just talk about whatever we want to talk about in that moment. It's like what is it that you want to get off your chest, or what is it you want people to know? And let's just talk about that, right? And I've been through so many different relationships and different things in my lifetime that I can usually relate with someone on some type of level. Like with you, I've not lost a child, right? I have not, but I have lost my nephew, and my dad died when I was 6. And so I do have a lot of experience around grief and death and things of that nature, but I have not actually lost my child, which is that's a whole new level, right? That's a whole new thing of, you know, that someone shouldn't have to go through. Um so yeah, but my sister went through it, right? And so I saw what she went through, and I saw um how that affected their family, right? And so I know I do understand to some level, but not on the deeper level by any means, right?
Yeah.
Um,
You
but
don't want to go through that shit, Chris. Trust me.
for sure, no, absolutely not. No one should have to go through that, and that's my husband makes fun of me all the time because we'll be watching movies, right, and then
Mm.
somebody's child will pass, and I just can't, right? I Both of my kids had to have surgeries when they were little, like
Uh,
baby little. And you know they give you get to stand there with them, and you see the light come out of their eyes when they put them out, right, for the with the anesthesia.
mm.
And that alone was just, and you feel pretty confident they're coming back, right? So but it's just like to see the light go out of their eyes like that, it's heart-wrenching. And I
Yeah.
can't I remember the whole viewing with my dad and things like that too. And I just, that is so hard to let go, right? It's to
Mm.
be like, this is the last time that I'm going to kiss my loved one, to be able to touch my loved one,
Mm.
and at 6 I'm not thinking, my dad's not gonna walk me down the aisle, right? I'm not gonna have the daddy daughter dances. I'm not gonna get any of that. And you're not thinking about that at 6 years old,
Wow.
but you do know that you're not gonna be able to have that relationship anymore because they're gone.
Yeah.
And I was 100% a daddy's girl, right?
Mm.
So, and I remember like the wailing of my grandmother, his mom. And I remember like just, because she had to bury her child, right? And so that
Mm.
sound will never, oh, it, like if people are like on movies or anything like that are crying in that way, right? Because everybody grieves differently. And sometimes people will, they cry, but then sometimes they wail. And when
Yeah.
they wail, I like will break out in hives. Like it is so much. But I, you know, when you have multiple children, you have you do rebound, you kind of, right? You have to, because you have other children, especially if they're young and living in the
Mhm.
home, right? Like with my
Exactly.
sister. And I don't I can't fathom how you do that. I don't know, right? And so you guys are so strong. So it's so strong to be able to do that.
Well,
Um,
hey, Chris, right? Let me ask you a question. Right? When you said, right, you lost your father when you were 6 years old, right? When you got married, how was that day like for you?
it was horrible. I'm not gonna lie to you. So, my mom and I didn't have the best relationship, especially at that time. I'd gone through a lot of things. And my my dad wasn't there to walk me down the aisle. I had to pay for my wedding myself, and I basically ran back and forth while I was getting ready and did all. I made my cake. I did it all. Decorated. I did everything, and I was a single mom. I had no money. So we did everything on a budget. I bought everything off of eBay, like used things, like all the things, right? And I made this wedding. It was a really pretty wedding, but my dad wasn't there to walk me down the aisle. I was fighting with my mom. I didn't want my stepdad to walk me down the aisle, but she kind of just, I guess, guilted me into that. My stepdad and
Wow.
I didn't have a great relationship growing up, although like now I understand some things as I'm older. He went through a lot of traumatic situations as well. Not that it excuses it, but I understand it, right? If you don't heal, hurt people. And so he wasn't treated fairly or properly either. And so even though, yes, as adults, we should be able to watch movies and all the things and understand how to love people, but if you've never been loved yourself, sometimes it's really difficult to just fall into, like, I'm just going to love everybody, right? So
Hmm.
he wasn't either. And yeah, I was fighting with my mom. My stepdad was walking me down the aisle, which didn't feel great. And but in the end, it all worked out. Everything was fine. I was very happy that I was getting married to my husband. I love him to death.
Yeah.
So once we got through that portion of it, and I really didn't even want to have a wedding. So that was another thing, is I wanted to just go to Mexico and get married.
Ah,
Um, but then my mom was like, then I'm not going to be there, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and here's the thing, they have the money to go, right? So it's like, I was like, just go, right?
yeah.
So it's not like they were poor. So I was poor, they were not. So, um, and so, yeah, I didn't understand it. And then it was like, no matter what I did, she's like, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, I didn't want to wear like high heels and stuff. I just want to be barefoot. I wanted to wear a dress, but I wanted to be barefoot. And she's like, no, don't do that. And I'm like, nobody's even going to see my feet. Like, so anyway, so it was just this big argument and fight. And then the missing my father. And I wanted to get married on Father's Day, but people were like, we're not going to come. So I had to change my date and not get married on Father's Day, because I wanted to do that as a tribute to my father.
So
Um,
that's like you being like a giver, right? You gave in to what everybody said to do and stuff like that. That's probably being a giver.
yeah, 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 which is crazy because I'm very headstrong, but yeah, I gave in, and I really should have probably just stuck with the date that I wanted to do, right? If they don't show up, then who cares, right? Like, I don't know why I gave in to that, but I did. But I guess, it wasn't just my wedding, right? It's my husband's wedding too, and I don't want people not to come just because I want something. It's our wedding. So,
Yeah.
and I didn't really discuss it with him. I probably should have, because he probably wouldn't have cared. So, um, but I just didn't, right? So I just changed it to make it easier on everybody, and it was what it was. But it turned out good, and I don't even know, 17, I think 17 years later we're still married. So yeah,
You doing
it
better
worked.
than me, girl. Man, I only lasted 12 years. And I was married twice.
I was married twice. Was that both combined was 12 years or like one was 12 years?
The one was 12 years, but it seemed like I married the same woman twice, but it looked different.
Well, did you figure out where you went wrong? Like, do you know where you're not compatible?
Oh, listen, I figured it out big time, but I think I figured it out right when I was on my podcast and I told my story. I was very brave about that shit. I was
Yeah,
warned not to do it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it, but I need to put it in parts. Like, you know what I mean? Because that was my therapy right
yeah,
there. You know, I've had many conversations with people. Once you see it, what do they call it? Therapists, whatever,
yeah,
therapists, or what they call what they call life coaches. What do they call?
yeah. Life coaches for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
And Chris, excuse my language. I don't believe in none of that shit. That's just me.
yeah.
um, I've been through it at my earlier age. It didn't work out for me, and I've been through multiple. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like dealing with other issues in the past. So I say, you know what? I'm going to tell my story. And when I told my story, I'm walking. I'm taking that same. I'm walking right. I'm walking with me. It's
Right.
kind of like how where you said on your podcast, like you can't understand, but you can walk with that person
For
to
sure.
understand.
Yeah, I can hold your hand the whole way so you're not alone. And that's, like you had said, all the thoughts came through when you're alone. And that's why a lot of times when people are grieving, they'll say they want to be alone, but like you really need to try to be there, at least in the house with them, right? So that they're not alone. So that when they do break down, you can hold them, you can hold their hand. That way they know, like you can tell somebody that they're not alone till you're blue in the face. But when they need you in that moment, and that's why I created my women's group. I have a women's group.
Okay.
Well, but I when you're in that moment, you need, if you're somebody that's me, that's like a kind of like a loner, doesn't have a lot of friends, you need somebody to be able to pick up the phone and say, I am struggling in this moment right now. This is the moment that I'm struggling with because like when I was younger, I attempted suicide and things like that. And it's just, you need somebody when you need them, not schedule, right? Because that's where therapist and counseling, and a lot of times that goes wrong, is because things change. You have time to think through it. Our brains naturally are going to uh, come up with reasons as to why we didn't really feel the way that we felt in that moment. So by the time you get it on the schedule, you get to the therapist or the counselor, you've already come up with ways to make yourself not look crazy, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever the case is, to sugarcoat what really you were feeling in that moment. And I mean, I think therapy has a time and place. I don't think it's the answer necessarily for everything, but I think therapy can be lots of things. Therapy can be art. Therapy can be, physical, like kickboxing, exercise. It can be
Mhm.
podcasts. I do have a lot of people that will come on and they say afterwards they feel so much better because they were able to get their story out, but it wasn't like I'm sitting there grilling them. What happened then? What happened then? What happened then? It's like they tell what they want to tell. We naturally flow through as a conversation. And
Yes.
sometimes they don't get it all out, right? And they come back and do a part two because we went so in depth on just one or two parts of the conversation, but we didn't really get through all of it. Like I was telling you with my story, it goes all the way back to conception. So, I mean, I'm telling you 43 years worth of my life.
Mhm.
It's going to take a while, right?
Yeah.
Um, but you know it's just people feel so alone in their grief when even though my grief and your grief were different, it's still grief. It's still a fruit is still a fruit even if they're two different kinds of fruit, right? Do you
Facts.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we can help each other out along that path and not be alone even if we don't understand completely.
Girl, man, I tell you right now, you're right. Our podcast is so similar because well, I don't know. Mine's a little bit overstopped than yours, though. But, but you know what? Let me ask you something because I get a kick out of mine. I mean, when I talk to different guests, to go through their journeys or a topic, or when I do my own stuff, because I'm a stats guy. I love stats. I'll do my own personal ones, or I'll do my little wrestling ones. And when I talk to people, I learn something new. No matter what the topic is, whatever the journey is, I learn something new every podcast, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it so much. Like, does that happen to you and yours?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally learned something new every time. I've had a lot of like nonprofits and military on my podcast, and I've learned so many different new things. Some that are positive and some that are not, about like just what's
Mhm.
happening in the world, right?
Yeah,
And as much as we want to say we're not sheltered, we're all sheltered. I mean, and it doesn't matter your poverty level, right? None of that doesn't really play into it. But even though we have the internet and all the things that are all over the place, some of it's real, some of it's not real. We don't even really know what's happening. And there's people that the internet isn't reaching, that we don't even know what's happening over in their part of the world, right? And it's
yeah.
like my brain works really strange, and it maybe other people, maybe it's not strange, maybe other people think of this, but like when I like to watch true crime. Like I'm that
Okay.
person that's like that I'm
Okay.
addicted to true crime.
Okay.
Um and I love watching it. One, it helps me prepare for what is happening, what could happen, right? Because I've been through enough to where I like to be
Yeah.
prepared. I'm always ready, right? Always
Mhm.
ready.
Mhm.
Um but like it'll show the dates, and then I'm trying to think, what was I doing? If can I remember the time frame or even the date of like when this is happening, when this person is getting like having these traumas, what am I doing? Like sometimes it's like I'm having a birthday party with my son, right? And I'm like, I'm over here celebrating my son's life and this person is dying. Like,
Oh,
and it's just like it's wild to me, and I know it happens, and everyone knows on the superficial like aspect that somebody's dying right now, right?
yeah.
But to know that story and to be able to connect that to something that you were doing that was either happy or not happy in that moment, it helps keep you grounded to be like, I am so grateful for what's happening in my life right now. Just like, breaking my computer, right? As
Yeah.
silly as that is, I'm pretty frustrated about that. But also, I had a computer to break, right?
So
So,
wait a minute. I may cut you off, but how did you break that computer?
oh, so but okay, I'm doing a remodel, like, and it ended up being like the whole house for the most part. And I was trying to find a nice background because you're also video, and I have a very pretty door, and so, but the cord to the computer was stretched across the thing, and like I had to move some drawers, and I did that, and then I tripped, and it's like it was the whole thing.
Are
I
you clumsy, Chris? Are you clumsy?
I have been getting that way in my older age. I think I had a stroke. Um, when I was having my last child. I really do. But I
Really?
think it's yeah, I think it was minor. You know how you can have those little bitty strokes.
Yeah.
Um, but I was having so many complications. I had HELLP syndrome, and one of the issues with HELLP syndrome is that your blood pressure jumps up really high, and that's why they had to go do an emergency C-section at 31 weeks. Was because I like within 5 minutes it was like boom, I'm about to die. And they're
Oh,
like, let's get, and like, they didn't even shut the curtain. My husband got to see all my intestines, like everything.
oh,
Um, yeah,
oh.
he was
He saw
like,
everything. He saw all
yeah,
of you.
I woke up in the middle too. Like,
Oh,
yeah. So, but you're leaned back, so I can't see anything, but I see his face, and I'm like, I asked him, I was like, are you okay? And he was like, yeah, I'm good, but I'm going to step out for a minute. And I was like, okay, and just went back to sleep. I'm like, all right, yeah.
I can
So,
imagine how he was.
yeah, my blood pressure jumped up to 220 over 181.
Ooh.
Um, yeah, before they did the emergency C-section and removed him, and that was on 4th of July. I was 31 weeks, and yeah, so I think I had a little minor stroke with that, and it just didn't get on the record, which is fine because it would have messed up life insurance and all the stuff. But
Oh man,
um,
you don't want that. You don't want that, right?
yeah,
Chris,
but since he's been born, just every now and then, sometimes I drag my foot or I'll slur my words, but for the most part, like 90% of the time I'm good, but it's just like every now and then, or I can't, like I'll be gripping something and I just drop it. Like I just can't hold on
for
to
real.
it. So I don't
Um,
know.
oh
Um,
man.
but
I'm sorry.
yes,
Go ahead.
I am a little clumsy too on top of it. So
A little clumsy.
a little
Chris, let me
clumsy.
ask you this. Let me ask
Yeah.
you this, right? I asked every podcaster this, even with Joe, because by the time this comes out for me, Joe's would be out already.
Okay.
Uh, how'd you come up with Untamed Psyche?
Well, so funny thing is I used to have a co-host and she actually came up with that for the most part herself. We went back and forth, came up with a lot of names that I was just like, no, no. I was actually in Aruba, so it was like hard to like communicate back and forth. I was kind of
Huh,
busy and
okay.
she was just like, we could do like up, like lift you up. And I'm like, I like that. But then it never even went into that. So it was just, but basically just trying to say like it's unfiltered, right? Because the world tries to put our psyche in a box, right?
Yeah.
And say, this is how we're supposed to think, this is how we're supposed to feel, this is what's right, this is what's wrong. But Untamed, we're unfiltered and we're able to, but I felt like unfiltered was used a lot. And so I was trying to think of something that wasn't used and oversaturated in the podcast world, but meant a similar thing. So we're a little wild, a little feral, and
Mm.
you
A little
know,
clumsy. A little clumsy. I got
little clumsy. Shut up,
you.
a little clumsy, and but my mind doesn't quite think, maybe like everybody else's, or if it does, great. But like, I'm not scared to say what's on my mind, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, and I think a lot of people get real caught up in what other people think and things like that. So, for instance, part of my story, okay, going all the way back, like I said, I went to inception. Um, my who I told you, died at 6. That's who I call my father, but he's not actually the one who helped create me. He's not my part of my creator, right? So my
Yeah.
creator, he actually was a neighbor and he raped my mom.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and so I found out for sure about, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago. I did a DNA test and I'm like half of a whole new another nationality. And I always knew it was a possibility because there was like stalking and like there's a lot of things involved. Like there was no way to deny it. But it was like one of those things that's like, I don't think that's what it is. He thinks it is, like whatever. But he actually like named a convenience store after me. It was Crystals with a K. Not the burger spot, but it was
yeah.
a convenience store back home, which is what actually sent him to prison. So,
You was
um,
talking about that on Joe's podcast, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, um, and so, yeah, it was my whole life. It was looking over my shoulder, that's why I'm always ready, right? I'm always having to look over my shoulder. He tried to kidnap me from school several times. Like, but it's not something that my mom really wants me to talk about, right? So,
Yeah.
um, my grandparents, her parents knew, uh, I don't know if my dad's parents knew or not, but they're both deceased anyway. And I don't know if the few family members that we still have alive do know. I know his sister knows because she helped me like do DNA testing and stuff. And but she just doesn't want people to know, and I understand because she's like, that's my story, and I don't want that. And I was like, yes, but it's also a derivative of my story, so we don't have to talk about the violence and the things that came up to the point of conception. However, the point of conception was not consensual, and after that,
Mm.
he terrorized me my whole life until he was locked up, and her too. But part of the reason he terrorized me is to get at her. And it was literally nonstop my whole life until I was able to move away. And then after I moved states 2 years later, he got locked up and he's in prison for life. So he's not getting back out. So
Oh,
I check on him every now and then to see if he's dead yet, but he's not. So
oh
yeah.
man. Yeah,
So
girl. Mm.
yeah, when you go down, when you do the whole wedding thing, like you talk about the dad walking, like you want to talk about daddy issues, like I got them. Like, I got them.
Oh my God.
So
Wow. You know what? I was wondering, where did She Wolf of all streets come from?
So I actually have two wolves. I had three when we initiated this. And yeah, I have three wolves. So, or I did. Two of
What,
them are
three
low.
actual live animals?
Yeah. So two of them are low content, and one of them is 86%. So she's high content. So she's almost full wolf. And a lot of people, I've just been in a lot of different industries in my life. I've obviously had a lot of different types of trauma, not just one major
Yeah.
event. It's like the waves of trauma they talk about, where it's like just one right after the other. And I don't have enough hands to even count how many rock bottoms I've hit, but it's fine because I always bounce back. And so someone actually was like, you're like the she wolf of all streets, because you like, and I'm a financial advisor. So although I can't really tie those two together legally,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where that thought process came from someone else, because they were asking me advice on something completely different than finances. And they're like, you like know everything. You're like the she wolf of all streets. And I was like, I'm gonna own that now. Is that okay? Like, and he's like, yeah, you should do that. So I trademarked it, and now I own it. So,
Oh, it's
but
yours.
yeah, so
Nice.
it's like lots of little things that came together into one pool of stuff, and that's what it became. So
Thank you for watching the show. Please like, subscribe, comment. Stay tuned next week for another exciting episode on Let's Talk About It.